Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
And then we come in and the tech guys, that are the company are passive aggressive, and it takes a lot of time to build up trust and say that we're not here to replace you. Everyone's objective, every consultant's objective should be to bring in skills that are missing on the client side while capitalizing on the skills and the knowledge that the client has better than anyone else in the world.
All right, let's talk building an IoT product or system. Time to cycle through concept to ideation, to proof of concept, to prototype, to minimally viable product, and then to end product. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, part 2 of 2, I speak with Yuriy Pryadko, who shares his experiences in the 6-step journey to manufacturing or deployment. In part 2, we get into plenty of details and numbers using a fun but useful product example, this time in the consumer IoT space.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is for business leaders and managers employing the Internet of Things for their business or the business of their customers. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair, and I interview the industry's leading authorities to find out how they use IoT to improve business and create value. If you like this show, subscribe to it on iTunes and go to iotinc.com to check out my complimentary articles, videos, meetups, and webinars.
This is episode 4 in our mini-series on IoT product pre-production with system integrators, product designers, or both. It's where we take all that theory from the last 30-odd episodes and put it into action by talking to the pros who've been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. Well, after a very satisfying 2-day intensive workshop a couple weeks back, I'm at it again. If you're interested in taking my 1-day workshop, I'll be putting it on in conjunction with the IoT Mega Meetup that we're having here in the Silicon Valley on January 13th, 2016. My meetup, along with the 3 other most active in the Bay Area, are combining forces in what we're calling the IoT Mega Meetup. We'll have at least 300 attendees joining us that evening, so if you want to make a day of it, come early, join me in the morning. By the end of the course, you'll have a solid understanding of IoT tech and how to use it to generate value in your business. For more information, go to www.iot-inc.com/training, where you'll get all the details. I'll also have a link to the meetup and to the course in the show analysis notes. Join us. And if you decide to register for the class, use the 33% discount code IoT Podcast 16, all one word. With me today on episode 38 is Yuriy Pryadko. Yuriy is Director of Customer Solutions at Cogniance with experience spanning product and process design, hardware and software development. Prior to his current position, Yuriy led the project management office, tailoring industry standard approaches to customer needs. This is part 2 of our 2-part interview. Welcome back.
Thanks, Bruce. It's good to be back.
All right, so let's just take it from where we left off. Okay, let's quantify the cost now a little bit, both in terms of money and time. You don't have to give us for this particular project unless you want to, but typical projects, I think it'll help our listeners to get their arms around this. And I've been asking this to all the guests when we've been speaking on this issue, but what are we looking at from a typical budget to get from this ideation or conceptual stage to production? So just take us through the pre-production. What has been your experience from a cost point of view? And then the next thing I'm going to ask you is from a time point of view.
Okay. Of course, I'm very tempted to say it depends. But
of course, but you're not. But you won't.
You won't let me.
I won't let you. No, I want to hear some numbers. Yeah.
I will give you some numbers. So for the design phase, for this initial workshop and prototypes, you're looking at about $75K and up.
Okay, that makes sense.
And for the development, it can be anywhere from the couple of hundred thousands to millions. It depends on the complexity of the hardware design, but also heavily depends on the software. And the software, when I was talking about the costs of personal trainer versus amortized cost of the R&D, the beauty of having of switching more of the solution to the software part is because it scales so well.
Sure.
Your incremental cost of having one more user sign up for the for the membership, for the NetPulse enabled membership, is zero.
Right. No, and thank you for those numbers, Yuriy. I mean, that's helpful for everybody. And just to put a finer point on it, when you say design, so, generally what we're going to want to get to is a proof of concept to then, make decisions whether we're going to move forward to our prototype or our pilot, depending on the circumstance of the project. Mm-hmm. Is that when you say design, is that taking us to any sort of proof of concept, or is that all on paper? Is there anything we can actually see and hold? Or maybe another way to put it is, what is the typical pricing to get to a proof of concept stage, or is that the design?
Usually the design phase will involve proof of concepts. Again, it depends on, it heavily depends on the complexity of the product.
Yes.
Absolutely. If you can prototype on a breadboard, totally yes. If you need some custom hardware development, then it's probably going to be extra. At the end of the design phase, after you've done all the insights extraction, all the problem finding part, and problem solving part, both sides of the cycle, you will end up with the prototypes. And for example, they can be, of course, they will not be production ready. For example, to give you an example, if we're talking about creating a device, a physical,
a thing, a product,
right?
Sure, yeah.
As the result of the prototype phase, you can end up with the 3D printed case for the device so that we can test the ergonomics of it. And on the side, there will be a breadboard prototype that will not fit into that case, but that will enable you to test the functionality and the schematics and maybe load up some embedded code into it and see how it works, how it blinks the LEDs.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And whether you're using a breadboard or an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi, I mean, again, you just want to get some sort of computational going in a low cost without having to get into FPGAs or anything more complicated like that. But okay, no, that sounds about right. I mean, $75K, and I think you're actually throwing in a 3D printed case. That's awesome. That's a pretty good deal, I'd say. But that's been about my experience too, is around between $50 and $100K to have anything of reason, a reasonable type of proof of concept.
Not the 3D printed case, a 3D printed physical prototype that
that's
you
what I meant.
That you will be able
to then manufacture, then get the molds made, and then spend all that money for the molds and all that. Yes.
In fact, it has very little to do with the molds, since the 3D model, the CAD model that you need to create for example, for injection molding is very different, and it should be designed differently from the step files that you would use for 3D printing. In our experience, we just have to recreate the model from scratch based on the based on the results of user testing. But that 3D printed prototype can be used for ergonomics testing on actual live people and getting feedback. Is it comfortable to hold in the hand? Do you see yourself using this thing in on the street in a public place? Will it be, wouldn't you look weird? Would you look from Star Trek? We had this very interesting.
What you look like from Star Trek?
We had this very interesting project where we were working on breathalyzer, smartphone connected breathalyzer, and we actually had a lot of iterations on the hardware design together with the manufacturing partners of the company was called Alcahoot. So together with the manufacturing partners of Alcahoot in China, we had a lot of iterations on how it would connect to the smartphone, simply because we didn't like the ergonomics. And it was a couple of months process just to get the connection right. It was connecting not via Bluetooth; it was connecting via smartphone jack, in order to to actually reduce the interoperability problems and to drive the cost down.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I think what you brought up earlier is an important point. And the 3D prototypes, when you're doing 3D printing, the modeling is very different. And it certainly doesn't include the CAD work that's going to be taken to actually build the real product or manufacture the real product, nor will it include the cost for the molds the injection molds to create them.
No, absolutely. That can run you into, the molds themselves can run you into tens of thousands easily.
Yeah, no, easily. I mean, just with my previous company, when I was, actually as a CEO of the company, we built some molds for just these small dongles. We call them dongles, but they were little devices, networking devices, and they were about $25,000. Now that was about 7 years ago, but I'm sure it hasn't changed that much.
It hasn't. It's the same order of magnitude now, maybe marginally higher. But today we have for this small volume production, there are actually 3D printers that can produce production grade quality that can be put out there in the field. And if we're looking at a very limited run, if we need 10 devices,
Yep.
it might be a sensible solution as opposed to injection molding.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. All right, let's talk about time now. So on the same, let's say for the same type of projects where you've given us a cost in terms of money, what about time? What are we looking at? And I know it does depend. It really does. Depends on, specifically if you're working with that startup that we talked about or you're working with that innovation lab. But what are you seeing if you squint your eyes, just roughly, what should people be thinking about?
For the discovery, for the first phase, it will be a couple of weeks to a couple of months.
Okay.
I think you shouldn't really go beyond 2 to 3 months max. Otherwise, you're not focusing enough. You're not doing the right thing.
And discovery, by definition, at the end of discovery, what are you getting?
At the end of the discovery, you will get the prototypes, and you will get the specifications for that you can run with and actually prepare for the manufacturing as well as for any software development that you may need.
Wow. So you're saying, I mean, this is a lot faster than my experience. So you're saying you're going to be able to get your customers to the prototype phase within 2 to 3 months? Or am I understanding that correctly?
It really depends on the definition of prototype.
Okay.
We'll have at the end of that 2 to 3.
Something we can show customers and clients, potential customers, potential clients. So we start getting feedback. Something they can actually hold.
Yes.
They can maybe punch around, play around a bit with.
Yes. 2 to 3 months is a good estimate, and we are very much used to moving fast. And faster than you would expect from the traditional big manufacturers or companies. A lot of our clients actually turn to us because they like this agility, the way to prototype, fail fast, and learn on the mistakes on a matter of months, not years.
And so if just so I understand again your framework or your definitions. We are starting from a concept, we're doing a bit of ideation, then we're going to prototype, then we're going to proof of concept, then we're going to production. Is that where a prototype fits in, or do you have a different way of looking at it? Yeah,
that's largely correct.
Okay.
The only thing is when you go into the implementation phase, where you turn that prototype into the actual product.
Like a proof of, like a prototype. Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
You will, first you have a prototype, then you would have an MVP, and then you will have the market product. So this 2 to 3 months is not for the MVP. This is for the prototype. This is for something you can show to customers, but this is probably not something you can do a large scale A/B testing on.
Okay, good. No, then that fits more in my thinking. And then what about to the MVP? Because you're right, that would be the last milestone before getting into production. Then what about timing to get to MVP?
So this is actually a very very tough question, since a lot of people have different definitions for what the MVP is. I've seen more than once and more than twice where people say, okay, this is going to be MVP that we're going to put in production and use for the first year or two. Right. And then we'll figure out if we need to add something. This is not an MVP. MVP is something that you cannot subtract from, not something you cannot add anything else to.
Okay. So clarify that. What do you mean by that?
I mean that the MVP stands for minimum viable product. Right. And minimum means exactly that. You need to descope everything that is not absolutely critical and crucial to the experience that you want to create for your users.
Okay. And you were implying, though, that some folks are well, they're saying it's ready before you think it's ready, or it's taking longer?
No, they say that, let's do an MVP, and then they keep throwing additional features into the MVP, so it becomes bloated and never gets released.
But by definition, it's not an MVP, then, is what you're saying.
And a lot of people think that's what the MVP is. And the point I'm trying to make is when the first release, the first version of the product shouldn't have anything but your core functionality, your core differentiating factor. To give you an example of an alcohol, back to that breathalyzer. The MVP was making sure that you can communicate with the device, you can read the data, you can display the blood alcohol content, right? That was an MVP. Right. That is something that you can run with, you can show to users, you can show to investors, say, we got this, right? The completed product, though, in addition to that functionality and the refined UX, it had two other features that the MVP didn't have, that had nothing to do with the core functionality, but that was integral for the user experience we wanted to create. In addition,
but are you saying then that you did not produce what the MVP was? You actually went beyond the MVP before getting into production?
Yes. So we actually we went beyond MVP before doing the final production run. And the two features that we had, and that was the hardware was pretty much done on the MVP stage, right? But on the software side, we decided that we want two more features in addition to displaying your blood alcohol content. Your alcohol, if you get one, will also, in addition to showing you how drunk you are, if you want to continue the night, it will also have a map that shows nearby bars. And if you think that you've had enough...
I did not think you're going that direction, but okay, keep going.
If you think you had enough, it will allow you to call a taxi.
Okay. I like that. It's for the party animals. Yeah, I measured it. Yeah, it's high, but so what? I got to keep going. I'm not driving, right?
That's exactly the point. If I'm not driving,
I'm past the minimal alcohol level or value level for driving. So I'm continuing on. So where's the next bar? I like that.
That's exactly the experience we wanted to create, and it became the perfect Friday night gadget.
It's the party breathalyzer.
It's a party breathalyzer, and by law, we are not allowed to legally say that here you are good to drive, here you are not good to drive.
Okay. But you can say, by law, you are allowed to say the next bar is just around the corner.
Absolutely. So by law, we are allowed to say your blood alcohol content is more than zero. So why don't you check out the next bar?
Just keep on going.
So that is not an MVP.
No, that's not an MVP. Okay, and so for syntax, I just want to be clear. Is there anything between MVP and production? Is that P, or do you call it anything different? Because, just to be clear, is it you go from MVP? What was it? What would you abstractly call the MVP plus the two features that you created? Is that the product?
That's the product. That's the end product. Okay. Yes.
The end product, and then you go into production from there. Is kind of what you're saying.
That's a correct succession. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so timing wise, we're saying then around 2 to 3 months to get to the prototype, and geez, now I'm trying to remember if you told me. Did you say how long typically to get to MVP? I don't remember now.
I didn't, because I was giving you the
Okay.
example of how different MVP can be for different people.
Right. Okay, that's right. Okay,
But
so what's the average?
it can be.
MVP?
Usually, we want this to be done in a couple of months. Again,
Okay,
if
so a
you're
couple
working for 2 years on the MVP, chances are you're not doing things right. Chances are you're working not on the MVP, but you're trying to skip the step and jump straight to the end product, which is not a good way to do it. Since
Absolutely not.
you do not have any way of knowing what your users will like, except for asking those users. And getting something in their hands as soon as possible is the only way to get that feedback. You don't want to do the production run and then figure out that, it's not, it looks ugly. It's not convenient to hold it. It's not appealing to your, to your target audience, or the data that you're getting from the sensor are of the resolution that is too low for the task that you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think this is something that I promote, and actually that I've been doing. I kind of moving from a developer to a product manager is the concept of design, sell, build, as opposed to design, build, sell. And what you're saying, I think, is very important, and you're being very clear on this. And just to reiterate, each of these steps, and the reason I'm kind of getting stuck on the syntax is because each of these steps are a definable point in time when you need to go to the customer. You need to, at each of them, and so with my clients, I go to the customer even before, because I'm usually involved before you would be involved, because we're planning on the business, then we're doing the requirements on the information, on the app, and then on the analytics, and then we get to some help. But at each one of these definable steps, we should be going to the customer, even to the point, in my view, before you even built anything, and just slideware where you're just talking about what it is. Because I'll tell you, and you've alluded to this, every IoT project that I've been working on, or that I've ever worked on, has changed, and not even a little bit. It's either changed somewhere between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. So, and it's always been the result of talking to customers. I mean, how does your experience bear out something similar?
Very well said. I couldn't have said it better. It's talking to customer on every stage.
And especially with IoT, and I think just in general, that's just the way to do it. However, with IoT specifically, conceptually, it's a very different beast. It's a very new beast for most people. And in front of them early as possible is the most important. Definitely is the most important thing. Okay, so now we've got the timing, and then so another couple months to get us to the MVP, and then to get us to the P. What we're talking, another couple months after that?
It can be from a couple of months to a couple of years. We had projects
to get to P. Okay,
yeah, we had projects
before you get to production.
We had projects that took hundreds of many years, literally, to get to P. It can go. It can get pretty big.
All right. So why don't you share some of this experience, some of this wisdom on what to do to not be beyond a couple of months there and not be a couple of years. So what have you seen? Why did it go that long? And what can you share with our listeners to help them not be in that same situation? So
that specific project was it was not an over time, over budget situation. It was a deliberately very large deployment of a smart home gateway that a large telecom provider in Europe would put in every home of every customer.
Got it.
And they just had a lot of work to do on the licensing, a lot to do on the actual hardware design. I remember how we struggled with the antenna and the interference, because we were cramming so much into a very small enclosure. We wanted to make sure it's sleek and it's not a huge box, not obtrusive. And it was a project with a number of external dependencies. External dependencies is sometimes what can kill you. I'll give you a smaller example, not as large, but still the dependency that have cost a friend of mine about a month worth of time, but they didn't have that month really, so it was a setback for them. They were doing smart home automation product for the blinds, for the window blinds, to control them, right? And they were sourcing a motor, and they found one, and they built a prototype with that motor, and it was all great until they ordered a bunch of them to put into the next run of the prototypes that they will distribute to the initial testers. And then it turned out that every single motor sounded differently. One was bzzz, another one bzzz. It doesn't sound like much, but
no, I think I agree with you though. They have to sound the same.
Yeah, you have to deliver the consistent experience to your users. Your quality standards have to be higher than everyone else's you're working with. Only in that way you will be able to deliver the great end user experience.
Right. No, I agree with you. Okay, so external dependencies. All right. I thought there might have been some trace that you've seen. So this wasn't like an overrun kind of situation. No. But what you are saying is external dependencies in that particular case. But generally, then minus the outlying, the corner cases, we're talking about another few months after the MVP to get to the P. Yeah.
I'd say another. If we're talking startups, if we're talking, companies that come to the market with a new product, and they don't have that interoperability baggage they have to deal with, I'd say another 3 to 6 months.
Okay. And then if they do have that baggage, then it's all bets are off at that point. You're not really sure, because that comes back to potentially some external well, they could even be internal dependencies, but there's still dependencies that might be out of their control.
I had some internal dependencies that were much worse to deal with than external dependencies, because with an external provider, you can come in and, drop an F-bomb and, make it sound serious. And, you have some levers. You basically can say, okay, I will go and find another provider at the end of the day. Whereas where you have an internal department in the large organization that is not cooperating, you don't have any power over them. You cannot fire them. You cannot do anything about it.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that paints a nice picture. I mean, what we're talking about in terms of steps here is starting with a concept, getting the ideation, whether they're working with you or maybe doing that internally, getting to a proof of concept, getting to a prototype, getting to the MVP, the minimal viable product, and then getting to the P. And as we're saying, and the advice here is each one of these steps, you're going to want to be going out and talking with customers.
Each one of these steps should be as short as possible.
As short, yeah, I agree with that.
Sometimes my customers freak out when they say, "Oh, Yuriy, we need to do this much work," and they drop me like a year worth of project, and I say, "No, this is not how you do it. You need to let's do 2 months and then reconsider." And they look at me like, "Why don't you want my business?" I don't want your business because in 6 months, the market might totally change and you may need to do a pivot, in a totally different direction. I don't want to commit to something that may not be valid down the road.
No, or like you said, it could be a case where the dog doesn't eat the dog food and the customer doesn't want it, and you want to make sure that you don't spend too much time before you learn that information. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So then that's good. So then we're putting some concept 1.0, 1.1, 1.2 potentially. But your advice here, and I think that it is valuable. Then if these don't let these discrete steps be long, and if they're more than a couple months, then you should be putting a point release in there, and again get to the customer, make sure that things are right, and not only the customer, then just gauge the market like what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the point that you put your finger on is very important, which is sometimes customers don't have a very good understanding of the market situation and of the product idea, etc. And you said that this is exactly what you're helping your customers to do that is extremely valuable. The people who come to me, having done the kind of homework that you can help them, you can enable them to do, that simplifies my job, that increases the chances of product success, by a significant margin.
Yeah, no, and that actually was going to be my next question: is what should companies do up front? And then, well, I guess I agree because I'm doing it. But whether it's myself or it's anyone else or it's done internally, what Yuriy is referring to, and what I referred to earlier, is really is start building a business plan. And again, this business plan, just like the product, is going to be iterated every single step along the way. But in this business plan, you need to really start looking at not only what the product's going to be, but also look at what potentially the implications of the industry will be, implications of competition will be, implications of operational issues within your company. And all these things all come together in the information requirements, the application requirements, and the analytics requirements. And I think once you've thought all those issues through, you can then go to a company like Yuriy's and you say, okay, I've got it, it may change, but I've got a very clear understanding of what is the information I need, what is the information requirements I have. These are the application requirements I have to make sure I get the information I need, and these are the analytics requirements I need to make sure I get the information we need. Now, please help me figure this out, because I have a knowledge gap, or I don't have a skill set that's required to get to to actually get to that point.
Knowing what you don't know is a great power.
It is, and this is something that other guests have said, and I've tried to implement myself in my dealings is just having an honest assessment of what your internal capabilities are. And often that's talked at least it's been on my show, it's been talked in the context of security, but I think you can generalize that and just be honest. And the reality is, where we are in the evolution of IoT, we need companies like yours. We need system integrators. We need product design houses, just because it's not plug and play yet, and that's just the evolution. At some point, it's going to be easier to pull together. But the other point I want to make is that it's not that expensive. If you look at the overall size of the budget and what has to be done, it's still worth even if you're just bringing in a company to get 80% of their value for 20% of the budget, using the 80% rule, a company like Cogniance, it's like, do it. It's well worth that cost, because doing this upfront work properly is going to make all the difference in the world. And if you don't have those skills, it's going to go south real quick. And
even more so, when you stage the work in a way where you can get a customer feedback after every single iteration, not spend 3 years on developing and putting the product onto the market just to know that no one wants it, is a great way to limit, to cap your losses. If, for example, if you do the initial trends analysis, if you do the initial, discovery, initial insights, and then you realize that your product doesn't make sense in the context of a larger picture, let's play make believe. Let's say we are doing the product that would connect through your car computer, or OBD2 through OBD2 or in any other way. You maybe some technician installation, and it would help you with fuel, improving your fuel consumption, right? And then you do the trends research, and in our imaginary world, in 3 years, there will be 95% of electrical cars on the road.
Right. Or gas prices, as we've seen, are going to be low enough that it doesn't justify the difference in what the savings would be, doesn't justify the cost of the product. Right?
Yeah.
Same kind of
Feds
concept.
have just raised the interest rate, which will drive the dollar down. The dollar goes down. The oil, the barrel goes down. And all the dynamics in the world show that this is going to continue for some time. Still, I'm not a big believer in hydrocarbons. I do think that we need cleaner energy and cleaner transportation. But right now you're absolutely right.
Yeah, the cost is pretty low. All right, so my other question I have for you is who generally approaches you from the company that is hiring you? Is it who puts up their hand, and are you dealing typically with a technical person, a senior manager, a product manager? Who is it that normally makes that initial contact?
It can be two ways. It depends on the gaps analysis, on the potential customer knowing what they don't know. Sometimes you have a very good understanding of your target market and your consumer as a company, but you don't really know how to implement the ideas that you have.
Right.
What is the current technical capabilities?
Yes, and I think that's probably the more typical situation.
It is very typical,
at least that I've seen.
It is very typical. But sometimes also we get approached by technical people who say, "Okay, folks, just recently we had this situation where people came to us, they worked with us before, and they said, well, we could have done this in-house, but we know that in this specific field." And very specifically, it was geolocation. We are very strong in GIS technologies. In this specific field, we know that you are, the best game in town. Can you help us? And they had very specific technical requirements that we actually helped them refine and revisit, and we did our own research. And that research actually made them go back and reconsider the product requirements, the business requirements. After our technical research, the business requirements have changed. So it's always a combination of the product people and technical people with whom we interact with. So I would say our typical executive sponsor would be either VP of product or a CTO.
Okay, so then typically on the technical side is what you're saying then.
We get very technical. There are a lot of people who are very good at doing stuff. There are a lot of outsourcing companies that can take the blueprint and do exactly what is said there. And there are a lot of companies who are great at designing experiences. You can think IDEO, right, and IDEOs of the world. But our Cogniance was built on the premise that there was no one on the market that can offer both under the same roof, both designing the experience and building the experience.
Yeah, no, and there are different skills, and I think that goes back to the gap analysis that you were talking about. Some companies will have one, some companies will have none, some companies will have, I'd say rarely it'd be none. I mean, rarely they'd be both. They'd have both. They're going to need some help, but yeah, and I think that does come down. But what I was getting at was generally what you're saying, realizing, yeah, you're highly technical, I understand, but it is who's making contact with you. So who's making contact with potential customers of people listening to this, to this podcast, is generally going to be on the technical side of the house. Is in your experience? That's what you're saying.
Both on the technical side and on the product side.
Okay, so on the product side as well. So you're saying it's kind of like a team approach. They'll approach you as a team then?
Oh, yes. Usually, the best collaboration happens when the product side and the technical side are aligned.
They're talking. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and this is often not the case. We've seen situations where the product side would come to us in distress and say, they don't understand what we want. Help us. And then we come in, and the tech guys that are the company are passive aggressive, and it takes a lot of time to build up trust and say that we're not here to replace you. We're here to help you. We are here to help you make your job better. We're here to ensure your job security, not replace you. And there is a politically incorrect term that I've heard somewhere, but to be Bangalored, which is to be laid off because your job was outsourced to Bangalore
somewhere.
But our objective is the total opposite of that. Our objective is to make sure that we bring in the skills I think everyone's objective, every consultant's objective should be to bring in skills that are missing on the client side, while capitalizing on the on the skills and the knowledge that the client has better than anyone else in the world.
No, and that's right. And generally speaking, specifically, when you're going into a particular industry, it's going to be the domain knowledge of that particular industry, the domain knowledge of that particular market, and you want to augment it. But I mean, that leads me to my next question. When you're working with these companies, and ideally it will be a team approach, both on the product and the technical side, what are the typical skills that are missing? What are the gaps that you're finding, and what are you typically filling in, I suppose, is maybe another way of asking the same question.
Mm-hmm. I actually think there is no single answer.
Okay.
There is, every you can say if you're doing something over and over again. If you're an ERP integrator, and if you if you're very good at for example automating the business processes of the retail company, right? Then you did Columbia, then you go to Old Navy, then you help maybe some with the slight changes.
Yeah, I get it.
You will. I mean, you do same thing with variations over and over again, and you become better than anyone else in that field. Our experience is a little bit different, and our focus is different. Every time we do something that has never been done before.
So, well, I guess where I'm going with this is if we're looking at it from an IoT perspective in particular, what is new for a lot of companies that I deal with are, number one, analytics, and number two, model building, and number three, application development. If they're not even, in some cases, they're not, they don't have software developers even on board. If they do, they're very different. So I guess I was wondering, I guess, more on the stuff that's unique, the capabilities or the skill sets that are unique to IoT. Analytics, right? I would presume that would be a common denominator with most of your clients, that they don't have the data scientists or they don't have the skill sets within the organization to be able to get these insights, specifically the ones that you were talking about. Like, for example, how was the insights in terms of the performance, capabilities of your example with the fitness club, or being able to tell when someone was about to quit? Who was doing that? Was that in-house? Was that a third-party data science group? Was it Cogniance? Who was it that in that case was doing that?
We do have in-house capabilities to do that, and it's always so for a case like this, we would work with the company representative for the industry insights, right? A data scientist has to know what to look for,
yes.
Right? And if they build a model, if they discover a relationship, they need an industry expert to tell if this is if this is valuable or not. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need an industry expert to say if this is valuable or not from a discovery point of view. But I think looking at the other way, at least what I promote is that the company should be identifying the pivot variables, should be identifying the components that's important for their value proposition to put into that model.
Yes.
And then it's a matter of implementing that model in a way that often, again, I presume anyway, at least that's my experience, and I wanted to get it from you, but that this data science or this analytic capability is not something that's that's available that's available everywhere or being used today in a lot of organizations.
This is not a very common skill set, and
it's a necessary one, right? If you want to extract the value, it's crucial.
It is crucial, and sometimes we have to when we are looking for talent, sometimes we have to look for people who don't think of themselves as data scientists. Sometimes we would find someone who has a PhD in applied math or in statistics, and they never considered that what they do is actually very applicable to the IoT the field, to harnessing this huge amounts of data that now you're now able to collect and making sense out of it and doing this small digestible nugget of information, the model that you will be able then to generate user value out of.
Right. No, and that's a good point. Is finding these data scientists is going to be a step, because any company that's going to be engaging with a consultant, a company like yours, my recommendation is you need to bring in-house the intellectual property that's very important for the product or the system that you're designing or you're building. And one of them is going to be this model development. It's going to be the analytics. It's going to be the software development. And so there has to be, what do you do? Because at least that would be, if I was hiring you and I was the company, I would say, great, Yuri, you're going to help us develop this. But I don't want to have to go to you every single time I want to make a change, or I may want to, morph this into something different. So I need to bring these skills and this intellectual property in-house. What do you normally do to kind of help that along, or to help the end user, or I should say your client, do this?
That's a great question, and it actually overlaps a lot with the initial discussion that we had on using the low-level libraries versus using the APIs. So a system that is well designed allows the non-technical user, non-data scientist, industry expert to work with the data and to generate, to extract those insights and to tweak the ways the models are being built, but based on the data, without without much help from the outside. So to give you an example of another vertical, which is not IoT, but it's very big and it overlaps a lot with the analytics question that we're discussing right now, advertisement, ad tech.
Okay.
Huge tasks with regards to measuring the effectiveness of the campaign, reach, all the metrics, all the all the per unit metrics. It's a lot of data, and you need to. And one of the projects that we were tasked with is to enable a C-suite to be able to work with that data interactively.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
so being able to interface with it in some way.
So you have this this Hadoop cluster on the back end that sucks this data in and processes it in some way, and then you need to anticipate what kind of questions a CEO would ask in preparing for his board meeting, and to give that data within minutes, not within days of trying to call up a data scientist and asking him, okay, what was the effectiveness of this campaign versus that campaign? And it it boils down. I'd say it's a user interface task first, and the product design task first, and then it's a matter of understanding that you need to build a solution that will cover the use cases that you want to cover. You will never be able to do that. Back to our main theme of today, you will never be able to do that without talking to your customer, without talking to that CEO and asking, okay, when you evaluate the effectiveness of the campaign, or the CMO, when you evaluate the effectiveness of the campaign, what do you look at?
What are you looking for? Yeah. No, I like that, and I think that's actually great advice in the sense of, Hadoop or any other open source, let's say analytics package, database structure, or database analytics package are super powerful. However, to access that power, you do need these people that we've been talking about, these PhDs in statistics or whatever the case may be. I like what you said. So what you're saying is you're developing a layer on top of it, like a user interface layer on top of the analytics. That's maybe not a dashboard because you're actually interacting with it, but it's a subset. But it's something that
it's an interactive dashboard. That's exactly what it is.
An interactive dashboard. Okay. So that would be it. But I think that's a great. I would think that's a great best practice, and just to consider.
And another best practice is to, contrary to a popular belief, is to not create choices for your
I agree.
end user, but to remove choices for your end user. As a CEO, I want a button that will say, produce me all the stats that I need, and nothing that I don't.
And only those, yeah.
Exactly. This is something that if you take Tableau, you can do beautiful data visualizations, but you basically can visualize whatever is there in the data, and you need to first do the user research and understand that these data are best suited to be shown on the map, and this has to be a histogram, as simple as that, on the very granular low level, and then generating insights from that. What kind of insights do we want to generate? We have to build, 100 models first, test them, see if the results make sense, then pick 5 out of that 100, and then allow a CEO to view the results of the modeling for those 5. How will this campaign go for a different market? It went well for the North America. If we launch the same thing for Eastern Europe or for Western Europe, how would that fare? Can we model that?
Right.
Answer is we can. But in order to enable those use cases, you need to understand your user very, very closely.
Yeah, and that comes back to what I preach and what I practice, and that is getting the requirements. And before interfacing with a company like yours, the requirements, again, just to repeat, what are the information requirements that the company needs? What are the application requirements the company needs? And then what we're talking about here are what are the analytics requirements that the company needs? Mm-hmm. And as part of those requirements can be, I need this type of interactive dashboard that'll provide this type of information. And I think that's a nice way to kind of close things off. So Yuriy, where can people find out more about you and your company?
I think I did talk a lot about what we do at Cogniance, so I don't need to spend any time on that. You can go to cogniance.com for more examples, mm-hmm. and for some of the examples that I used today. Myself personally, I'm very reachable. Feel free to ping me on Twitter. Feel free to email me. Feel free to reach out in any way, and I will be more than happy to give advice, to consult on on your IoT product strategy and beyond that. And if we're not the right partner, and sometimes we are not, we have a vast network of partners that I will be happy to introduce you to if need be.
Great. No, that's a generous offer, and I think if people have questions, they should definitely take advantage of it. And I'll put your Twitter handle as well as your company's Twitter handle in the show analysis notes. But that's great. No, thank you, Yuriy. That was a good 2-part interview. I appreciate it, and we'll be talking soon.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. It was a pleasure, and I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, that was episode number 38. For a summary, links, and other resources, just go to the show analysis notes. They can all be found at iotinc.com/podcasts. Now remember, there's a hyphen between the IoT and the Inc. As always, if you have any ideas or suggestions, just send me an email. I can be reached at bruce@iot-inc.com.
Well, now I could use your help. We're trying to get this show off the ground, and the best way to get discovered is with iTunes. So if you've enjoyed the episode or found it informative, I'd really appreciate a review. All you have to do is go to iot-inc.com/iTunes, and that'll redirect you to our iTunes page where you can let people know what you think by simply giving this show a star review or leaving a comment. I'd really appreciate that. If you'd like to learn more about the business of the Internet of Things, visit my media site. It can be found at iot-inc.com. There you'll find other podcasts as well as articles, videos, and information about upcoming live events like my stream meetups and webinars.
I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thanks for listening. Until next time, may your path to IoT business be a 6-stepped one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.